Hey everybody, Organized Biology here. What the heck is LDL and how do we get it out of our arteries? We're going to talk about that today. So first off, LDL stands for low density lipoprotein. That basically just means that this stuff is made of lipids, which are fats, and in this case we're going to talk about cholesterol being the fat, and proteins. Now the proteins will be along the outside of the LDL, and the cholesterol, the fat portion, will be on the inside. The reason we do that is because the proteins dissolve better in the fluid of your blood, so they are going to coat the lipid. Now, why do we need these in the first place, right? Why is this floating around in our bloodstream? Well, this black stuff we're going to name as cholesterol, and cholesterol actually makes up the cell membranes. Remember, you're made of 30 trillion cells, and all of them are surrounded by this membrane called the plasma membrane. Most of that plasma membrane, or a lot of it at least, is made of cholesterol. So we're transporting LDL throughout the body alongside HDL and other ways to carry cholesterol, and it's going to drop it off at cells so the cells can take it in and use it to build their membrane. So we're zoomed in on a cell to see how it actually gets inside the cell and therefore out of the bloodstream. So here I have LDL floating around in the blood, and this cell wants to pick up some cholesterol to build something, whether it's the cell membrane, and it also produces hormones, steroid hormones. So we're going to bring this LDL molecule into the cell. So what do we need? Well, we need receptors called LDL receptors, all right? They are going to be embedded in the cell membrane, and as you can see, they look like they'll fit that LDL molecule really nicely. So what will happen is these molecules will bind to those receptors, which will initiate a cellular response. That response will be what's called endocytosis. That basically just means we're bringing large molecules into the cell. That's where we get into cytosis, into the cell. Great. So endocytosis is when the cell membrane actually closes up around the molecules after they bound to those LDL receptors, and therefore after that, they can use all of that free cholesterol that they brought in to basically build their cell membranes, to go make some steroid hormones, etc. So this is an important process because these cells need that cholesterol. Now, the thing is, a lot of the times this LDL that's floating around in your bloodstream is there because we are transporting saturated fats with cholesterol that we actually ingested. That's one reason why we need to keep our saturated fat content that we eat relatively low, because it does raise our LDL levels. But here's the thing. Some people have very elevated LDL in their blood for no reason at all. Their diet's fine, their lifestyle's fine, but for some reason it's in elevated amounts. Now, the key here is in the nucleus. So real quick, the DNA is in the nucleus, and this is the instruction manual on how to build proteins, okay? And in this case, I'm showing proteins as this red section, right? So where did these receptors come from? This cell actually read the instruction manual of DNA, coded it onto a recipe called mRNA, and then made that LDL receptor, and then embedded it in the membrane to grab the LDL. Now here's the thing. Some people do not have this gene being a DNA segment. Some people don't have that gene, or they have a very poorly functioning instruction manual. It's like if you're trying to build like a nice house, you're instead given the instruction manual on how to build a Barbie dream house, okay? The instructions just aren't good for the function that it's serving, right? So if these people can't make this protein, that means this protein will not be in the membrane. And if this protein is not in the membrane, well, the LDL has nowhere to go besides staying in the bloodstream. And this causes a disease called hypercholesterolemia, which literally stands for high cholesterol in the blood. This is a genetic disease because you inherit the lack of a good LDL receptor gene, okay? And if you don't have that gene, you're not making the receptors, you don't make the receptors, you can't get the LDL out of the blood, and therefore you have high blood cholesterol. And this is dangerous because LDL can actually stick to the walls of the arteries, causing what's called atherosclerosis or hardening of the arteries. It's very important that people with hypercholesterolemia have a low saturated fat diet to keep these numbers as low as possible.